Hi guys, welcome to topic 1, number and algebra in the Math HLAI course. Today we're going to be looking at arithmetic sequences. So firstly, let's look at what an arithmetic sequence actually is. It can be defined as a sequence of numbers where the difference between any two successive terms is constant. So that basically means that any two terms within the arithmetic sequence that follow each other, basically being defined as successive, have a difference between them that remains constant throughout the entire arithmetic sequence. So I'm going to give a very basic example which will help kind of visualize this. So a very basic arithmetic sequence can look a little something like this. So here are four terms within the sequence. This is our first term here, so we would call that U1, and then this would be U2, and so on and so forth. And the most important thing here, which basically makes this an arithmetic sequence, is the difference is the exact same between all four of these terms. They have a common difference, which in this case would be 2. Okay, moving on, let's look at some of the formulae that are given within the IB formula booklet for arithmetic sequences. This first formula that I've written down refers to finding the nth term in an arithmetic sequence. In this case, n is a placeholder for the number within the sequence that we're trying to find. So to make this more clear, we could have a sequence of numbers and we're looking for the fifth term within the sequence. N in this case would be 5. So if a question asks for you to find, let's say, the 21st or the 170th term within the sequence, this formula will help you find it if you have all of the components of the formula to help you find it. On that note, let's take a look at what all of these letters mean. So we have U1, N, and D within this formula. U1 refers to the first number within the sequence, so the first term. And as you can see, I wrote U1 up here, so in this case, U1 would literally be 1 for that arithmetic sequence. N refers to the nth term that we're looking for. So the question may say, find the 6th term within the arithmetic sequence. So in this case, n would be 6. And D is the common difference. So in this case, in the previous example, the common difference would be 2. So I'm just going to write that down. So it's very simple. All you have to do is input the values. In a question, I would recommend making sure that you write out what each of these numbers are. So what your first term is, your nth term that you're searching for, and your common differences. Write out the values of those numbers and then input them into the formula. This will minimize mistakes and hopefully ensure that you get the answer correct. Okay, I've very quickly written out an example. So in this case, here's our arithmetic sequence. It goes 2, 7, 12, 17. The numbers above are just specifying which place within the sequence they are. So we have U1, U2, U3, U4. So we have the first, second, third, and fourth term within the sequence. And then I've just written out, like I specified that you should do, what we're looking for our formula. And like I said, we're looking for the 16th term. So firstly, our first term would be 2. It would tell you that within the question. N would be 16th because we're looking for the 16th term. So that would be 16. And as for D, this is the common difference. So I always draw an arrow. This isn't necessary, but this is what works for me to visualize it, is how we're getting to the next term. So we just would do 7 subtract 2 and we would get 5. And this, if it is an arithmetic sequence, would remain constant throughout the entire sequence, as we discussed before. And in this case, it does. Therefore, it is an arithmetic sequence. I always just make sure that it does work. It almost always does, but I just write the 5 out 3 times. That's just what works best for me. But as long as you are aware that it is 5, then you are good. So I'm just going to write the 5 out. Then I'm really quickly going to write out the formula again. This is just another tip. I would suggest writing out the formula that you have in your formula book, just transfer it, write it out in your exam answer booklet or wherever you're writing your answer, so that you make sure you have the formula correctly down and that you're not just copying your values, your exact values, into the formula from the formula booklet. This increases the chance that you may forget the plus symbol, for example, or the multiplication symbol. So this is just another suggestion. Okay, let's actually input our values. So we're looking for U16, so our 16th term within the sequence. U1 is 2 plus 16 again, minus 1. And then the D just being next to the brackets means multiplication, so multiplied by 5. Now, in this case, you can just input this directly into your calculator. Make sure that you add the brackets around the 16 subtract 1, which would literally just be 15. But make sure you add the brackets so that there are not any issues with BidMass. If you do this by hand, make sure you do follow the rules of BidMass. So if we do this by hand, then we would have 2 plus 15 multiplied by 5. And then we would have 2 plus, since this is BidMass, multiplication comes first, 15 multiplied by 5 is 75. And then you would do 2 plus 75. So I'll just write that out. 2 plus 75, and that would be 77. So the answer to our question, the 16th term within this sequence, would be 77. Okay, looking at the second formula that I've written down here, this refers to the sum of n terms of an arithmetic sequence. So in a question, you would typically be asked, find the 70th term, the sum of the first 70th terms within the sequence. So it basically wants you to add up every single term, all 70 terms within the first 70 terms within that sequence, and you would get quite a large number typically. And this basically gets you to do it using the formula. The formula, the letters mean that identical, the exact same thing as this first formula here. The only difference you can see is that there's an A. The A is basically another way of writing U1. So U1 and A are interchangeable. They basically mean the first term of the arithmetic sequence. So I would do the exact same thing. Write out your different values. So N, A or U1, and D. And then just input them the exact same way into the formula. I would recommend doing this all on your calculator. Make sure you do not forget these brackets and these brackets. They're super important because your answer will change depending on whether you've put the brackets correctly or not. Okay, we've moved on to look at a worked example. This is one of the simpler examples that I found, and hopefully this will be a good introduction. This is a paper 1 question. So reading the question, it says the Osaka Tigers basketball team play in a multi-level stadium. The most expensive tickets are in the first row. The ticket price in yen for each row forms an arithmetic sequence. So that's the first key bit of information there, is that each row forms an arithmetic sequence. I'm just going to underline that. Typically, it's good to underline stuff or highlight stuff within a question. Prices for the first 3 rows are shown in the following table. So basically what they're saying is this is U1, U2, and U3, and these are the 3 successive terms. So now that we've established that, let's look at part A. It wants us to write down the value of the common difference, D, of this arithmetic sequence. To do that, all you have to do is subtract. You can pick 2 of the terms, so let's do the second term, subtract the first term, and that would give us our common difference. So in this case, that would be 6,550 subtract 6,800, and that would give us negative 250 as our common difference. So D equals negative 250. And that would be our answer to part A. Okay, I'm realizing this very coincidentally now that it wants us to find the price of a ticket in the 16th row. That is the exact same value for n as the example that I gave above. That's a coincidence, but as I've just said, our value for n would be 16th, and this is finding the nth term in an arithmetic sequence. Therefore, we'd need the first formula that I talked about previously. Okay, so firstly what I'm going to do is write out the formula. Un equals u1 plus n minus 1 times by d. Then I'm going to write out n, u1, and d. And we're going to find the values. Okay, firstly we know that n is equal to 16, and then we know that u1 is equal to 6,800 as specified above, and then d, which we've just found, is negative 250. So I'm just going to write those values in. So I'll repeat, n is 16, u1 is the first row, u1 here is 6,800, and then d is equal to negative 250. And if you're wondering, yes, you can have common differences that are positive and negative values. And then we just input this into the formula. So u16 would be equal to 6,800 plus 16 minus 1 multiplied by negative 250. Okay, I've inputted that exactly as it is written here into my calculator, and I got the answer 3,050. Which means that the price of a ticket in the 16th row would be 3,050 yen. Okay, for part C, it wants us to find the total cost of buying 2 tickets in each of the first 16 rows. So as soon as I see first 16 rows and it wants the total cost, we are looking for the sum of n terms in an arithmetic sequence. So over here we've written n, u1, and d, and these 3 terms are still applicable. These values essentially are still applicable to this question. So I'm quickly going to just write out the formula. Okay, I've just written out the formula and the values of our 3 parts to the equation that we have to know. And even in this case, n still remains the same because we're looking for the first 16 rows, and in the previous part B question, we were looking for the 16th row. So even in both of these different questions, n still remains 16. This would not be the case for every type of question, however, just be aware of that. Okay, I'm going to do the exact same thing here where I'm going to write out the equation, but this time I'm going to input the values of each of the parts of the equation. So S16, so the sum of 16, the first 16 terms would be 16 divided by 2 multiplied by 2 times by, I'm going to put that in brackets, 2 times by 6,800 plus 16 subtract 1 multiplied by negative 250, close brackets. Once again, the brackets are extremely important within these types of questions because the formulae all require brackets and therefore BIDMAS applies. You can do this by hand, but I would just recommend doing it in your calculator because then you minimize the risk of you making just a small mistake that can just affect your entire answer. So the value that I've gotten for this is 78,800. I'll write that out now. 78,800. Now, that would be the sum of the first 16 terms within the arithmetic sequence, but reading our question fully again, it wants us to find the total cost of buying 2 tickets in each of the first 16 rows. So what we've done here is we found the cost of buying 1 ticket per row of the first 16 rows. So instead of finding the total cost of buying 2 tickets, we found the total cost of buying 1 ticket in each of the first 16 rows. So the last thing that we would have to do here, very important last step, would be to multiply our answer by 2. So we would do 78,800 multiplied by 2, and our answer would be 157,600. Now in the IB, you typically want to, if not specified, round your answers to 3 significant figures. So our answer would be 158,000, my bad, 158,000 yen. There we go. Cannot say that properly. And that would be our answer to part C. So all in all, if you were to take one thing away from this entire lesson, I would say just ensure you are able to identify arithmetic sequences because they will not always specify that it is an arithmetic sequence, and the way to do that is to have a common difference, meaning the difference between each successive term is constant throughout the entire sequence. Thank you.